All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolute historical mystery. We're going to dive into two vastly different interpretations of a single, kind of cryptic chapter of ancient text, Isaiah chapter 18. It's actually mind-bending how a few verses, written thousands of years ago, can be viewed through completely different paradigms depending on who's reading them. We're going to look at how history, geography, and theology all intertwine to give us two entirely distinct ways to read the exact same words.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the land of wings, followed by the Assyrian threat, and then a present to Mount Zion. After that, we'll pivot to a latter-day translation and wrap up with gathering the scattered nation.
Section 1. The Land of Wings, the Ancient Near East in 701 BC.
So, to understand our first lens, we need to travel back to the upper valley of the Nile. It's the late 8th century BC, and a massive geopolitical crisis is brewing. Isaiah chapter 18, verses 1 and 2 kicks off like this. Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sendeth ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, saying, Go ye swift messengers, to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled. Now, historically, scholars point out this refers to King Tiraka of Ethiopia. He's sending ambassadors down the Nile in these incredibly fast ancient papyrus boats, the vessels of bulrushes, making a desperate dash to Jerusalem. Why? To form an alliance against the unstoppable military machine of the Assyrian Empire.
Right off the bat, there's this fascinating nuance. You heard the word woe in that quote, right? It totally sounds like a curse. But historical commentators like Bishop Loth clarify that the original Hebrew word here is actually a greeting. It translates way better to ho, or hail. So Isaiah isn't cursing these ambassadors, he's literally calling out to them as they arrive. And what about that strange phrase, the land shadowing with wings? Well, in this historical lens, it relates to the famous swarms of flies that were everywhere in ancient Ethiopia, or maybe even the winged solar disk, which was a super common Egyptian symbol back then.
Section 2. The Assyrian Threat. A call to the world.
So, why were those ambassadors in such an absolute panic? Notice the sequence of events here. Isaiah's words are acting as a severe warning right before the massive invasion by the Assyrian king Sennacherib around 701 BC. Both Judah and Ethiopia know the Assyrians are coming. The tension in the region is at an absolute boiling point.
And right in the middle of this tension, Isaiah issues a global alert. In Isaiah chapter 18, verse 3, he says, All ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, see ye, when he lifteth up an ensign on the mountains, and when he bloweth a trumpet, hear ye. He's dramatically including Ethiopia and, well, all nations in this summons. He's telling them to brace themselves, not just for a clash of empires, but for the exact moment of Jehovah's decisive divine intervention.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding what Isaiah means by an ensign in this specific military context. To the ancient Israelites staring down an invading army, an ensign wasn't just some flag blowing in the wind. It was a signal of profound military importance. It was as distinct as a blazing beacon fire lit on a high hill or the sharp, terrifying blast of a watchman's trumpet. It was an alarm screaming the imminent downfall of the Assyrian forces.
So, how is this downfall actually going to happen? Isaiah chapter 18, verses 4 through 6 gives us this beautifully chilling metaphor. The Lord says, I will consider in my dwelling place afore the harvest, he shall both cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks, they shall be left together to the fowls. Picture this. While the Assyrians are busy plotting their grand designs to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord is described as just calmly waiting, taking his rest. And right before the Assyrians can harvest Judah, when their plans are perfectly ripe, the Lord steps in, prunes their branches, and leaves them for the mountain birds. And this brilliantly illustrates the actual historical fulfillment. According to the texts, a staggering 185,000 Assyrian soldiers were wiped out overnight. Their massive army was literally left dead on the mountainsides for the birds and beasts. Just like that, the threat was obliterated in a single stroke.
Section 3. A present to Mount Zion. The aftermath of deliverance.
You can only imagine the shockwaves this miraculous deliverance sent through the ancient world. Isaiah chapter 18, verse 7 concludes with this incredible image. In that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts, of a people scattered and peeled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion. Because of this unbelievable event, all the surrounding nations recognize the sheer power of the God of Israel.
Commentators like Ellicott and Benson point out that the Egyptians and Ethiopians were allies of Judah, right? They were fellow sufferers staring down the exact same Assyrian invasion. So when Jerusalem was miraculously spared and that Assyrian army was destroyed, these nations were overwhelmingly grateful. So much so that they traveled to Mount Zion, bringing physical gifts and presents to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem to honor his God. It's just a perfect historically grounded resolution to the chapter.
Section 4. A latter-day translation, a modern prophetic lens.
Okay, now we're going to completely pivot. We just walked through a very cohesive explanation grounded entirely in ancient geopolitics. But what happens if you take those exact same verses and apply a modern, Latter-day Saint theological lens? Well, the meaning transforms entirely. Let's start with a really interesting question posed by LDS leader Joseph Fielding Smith. Do you know of any land in the shape of wings? Try to picture a world map in your mind. If you look at North and South America, connected by that narrow isthmus of Central America in the middle, it arguably looks exactly like the massive, spread-out wings of a bird in flight. It's kind of a mind-bending visual once you see it.
To back this up, Latter-day Saints look at other Bible translations. While the King James Version says, "Woe to the land," other translations, like the Catholic or Goodspeed Bibles, translate it as "ah," or the sound of whirring wings. Latter-day Saint theology actually embraces the idea we touched on earlier, that this is a mistranslation. It's not a curse or a woe, it's a joyful hail, and through this lens, it's a greeting directed specifically across the ocean to the Americas.
So, looking through this modern theological lens, Joseph Fielding Smith breaks down the imagery of verses 1 and 2 like this. The land of wings is the American hemisphere. The vessels of bulrushes are understood as modern vessels of speed crossing the ocean. And that nation scattered and peeled, that's interpreted as the ancient land of Israel, which historically was denuded of its forests and had its people scattered all across the globe.
Section 5. Gathering the Scattered Nation, the Ensign to the Nations.
This modern lens totally changes the narrative from ancient warfare to a massive global religious mission. Remember the ensign from verse 3? The beacon fire on the hill? Well, in the Latter-day Saint interpretation, this is no longer a military signal warning of Assyrian doom. Instead, the ensign represents the restoration of the gospel. It's a spiritual standard published to the world, a figurative flag raised on the mountains calling missionaries to gather scattered Israel back together.
Which brings us right back to that final verse, Isaiah chapter 18, verse 7. In that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts. In our first lens, this was literally gold and tribute from grateful Egyptian neighbors. But Joseph Smith taught that in the modern era, the Latter-day Saints themselves are laboring to bring a very different kind of gift. The present brought to the Lord is the restored house of Jacob, a fully gathered Israel.
And where exactly is this gift brought? To Mount Zion. In modern Revelation, Mount Zion is identified as the New Jerusalem, located not in the Middle East, but in America. Latter-day Saint scholars point out that the Jerusalem Bible describes this land as the country crisscrossed with rivers and a people terrible from their beginning, meaning always feared. For them, these passages perfectly describe the Americas as the destined place for the spiritual restoration and gathering.
When you view these side by side, it is absolutely fascinating to see how impartially and perfectly both of these distinct lenses map onto the exact same text. Under the ancient historical lens, the land of wings is Ethiopia, the ensign is a military beacon against Assyria, and the present is literal Egyptian gifts given to King Hezekiah. But shift gears to the Latter-day Saint lens, and suddenly the land of wings is the American continent, the ensign is the restoration of the gospel, and the present is gathered Israel being brought to a new Jerusalem. Both lenses find incredibly deep, coherent meaning in Isaiah's poetic words. They're just separated by thousands of years and a fundamentally different worldview.
And that leaves us with a pretty profound thought to wrap up our explainer today. When you look at an ancient text like Isaiah 18, it acts almost like a mirror. How does our position in time, in geography, and in our personal belief systems change the way we interpret ancient prophecy? Are we seeing the geopolitics of 701 BC, or are we seeing a divine blueprint for the modern world? It is a real testament to the enduring, layered power of these ancient texts, that they continue to speak to different people in different eras in such deeply meaningful ways. Keep asking these big questions, keep looking closely at the sources, and thank you so much for exploring this with me today.